Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with X History, with the last part of the Nazi Occultism. Hey, well, time for some Norse mythology with Thor's hammer. So yeah, I guess they're going for the Norse ones, Let's just see how things go from here. Here's where their cult science beliefs go. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Here we go.
Berlin, March 30th, 1945.
Yep, the end of the war.
Himmler realizes it's over. The Allies are closing in and everything has fallen apart. The world ice theory experts he'd used as meteorologists had underestimated the Russian winter. His revolutionary projects to use dowsing and pendulums to unlock mineral deposits and find Allied ships in the Atlantic have failed. And even his Ahnen-Irbe project to find the secret of Thor's hammer has yielded no results. So he sends an order to destroy Castle Vivasburg before the Americans can take it, but the lack of explosives means the SS can only collapse the towers. As the demolition team retreats, local villagers surge in to pillage what's left of the castle's interior. They trudge through Himmler's museum of prehistoric artifacts and rooms where SS officers have conducted marriage rituals before lit candles and christened newborn babies by touching them with a dagger. Wow. They loot plates with rune markings and open a room filled with skull rings, each belonging to a dead SS officer. It's Ragnarok to the beat of Soviet artillery.
Pretty much. Maybe you should have focused more on the war, less on mysticism. They're good in that one now, aren't they?
For helping us tell important historical stories while also keeping people's personal data personal.
Thank you.
As Germany plunged deeper and deeper into the Second World War, the seeds of their occultism, superstition, and reliance on pseudoscience increasingly came back to bite them. The Ahnen-Irbe had turned from its pre-war mission of recovering ancient culture and attempting to prove fringe racial histories, and instead concentrated on military projects. As early as 1940, Heinrich Himmler contacted Ahnen-Irbe researchers, telling them to find any mention in ancient art or folklore of Thor's hammer Mjolnir and its ability to shoot lightning. "I am convinced," he wrote, "that this is not based on natural thunder and lightning, but rather that it is an early, highly developed form of war weapon of our forefathers. That it was only wielded by the gods," he reasoned, quote, "implies an unheard of knowledge of electricity." Then swinging back to 1944, and things looking increasingly dire for Germany, he returned to the pipe dream, forming an Ahnen-Irbe think tank to create a new Thor's hammer, a theoretical EMP that would interfere with or destroy Allied electrical equipment. Needless to say, after several weeks, they concluded this was not feasible with the current level of technology, and other projects involving dowsing, pendulums, clairvoyance, and ESP were similar failures. A breeding program attempting to produce a new generation through selectively breeding SS men with genetically vetted women was, to put it mildly, not replacing the current generation of Germans being killed at the front or in bombing raids. But the Ahnen-Irbe were doing other things, far darker things, to support both the war and the new world the Nazis were trying to build. So a quick...
no offense, but the fact they were trying to recreate Thor's hammer Mjolnir, you gotta admit, they were pretty doomed from the start. Unless you can, or at least have some way to do it, don't announce it like that. You're just gonna set yourself up for failure. It looks like when you give it to Nazis, these guys, they just don't quit. Even when everyone says, don't do it, they do it. Oh boy. But here comes the dark side of the Ahnen-Irbe.
Quick content warning here. If you would like to skip those specifics, please jump to the time code on screen here. After taking Crimea in Operation Barbarossa, Himmler put his scholars to work. Dig teams went out to survey supposedly Aryan archaeological sites in the region to support the political claim that the Crimean Peninsula fell within the German homelands in ages past. The groups of people living in the area would either be forcibly resettled or liquidated by death squads in order to clear the living space so the Reich could set up idealistic farming communities growing grain using seed stocks brought back from Tibet. Yet who exactly should be killed was difficult to determine. Central Europe, it turned out, contained a frankly dizzying amount of ethnic identities and people groups, many of which overlapped with each other. So Ahnen-Irbe academics went with their calipers and tape measures to try to determine who would be killed. Though the darkness did not end there. With the death camps in full swing, the Ahnen-Irbe oversaw horrific human medical experiments. In one of their many, many evil acts, they selected 86 Jewish men, women, and children from Auschwitz based on what they considered, quote, representative skeletal characteristics, then murdered them in a gas chamber in order to display their skeletons in an anthropological exhibit. The goal here was to display them in a museum and have interpretive materials that explained how Jewish people were, quote, subhuman and biologically different from Aryans. Bruno Biga, the anthropologist and race science specialist from the Tibet expedition, was the one who conducted the skull measurements and helped select the victims. He was also the only prominent member of the project who would not be sentenced to death for his involvement. Rather, he served 3 years in prison and died in 2009. This was not the only time that anthropology and archaeology played a role in the Holocaust, though. In addition to the Ahnenerbe plundering museums and private galleries across France for supposedly German artifacts, like the Bayeux Tapestry, the organization seized hundreds of religious objects from Jewish communities, and regional occupation authorities did the same. In fact, the Jewish Museum in Prague offered to do this themselves, ostensibly to help the Nazis value them, but actually as an act of resistance, documenting Jewish religious life in Prague so that it would be preserved even after both the community and eventually museum staff were murdered. Remember what I said?
That's actually the smart play, to be honest. Like you gotta preserve that heritage somehow. Like, even if you're on, the artifacts are still gonna stay the same. So, in a way, displaying your so-called subcultures, like, artifacts are gonna make people, like, really interested in them. So, yeah, but giant view to the Nazi party there. Anyway.
Said at the beginning of this series that just because someone's ridiculous doesn't mean they're not dangerous. All of this absurd stuff about Atlantean supermen, werewolves, ice moons crashing into the earth, bad archaeology, and ancient Germans building Inca ruins, all of it leads here. And sometimes the connection is really direct. At one of the first meetings of the Ahnenerbe, Himmler began discussing prehistoric bog bodies discovered in Scandinavia and claimed without evidence that they had been executed due to being gay. And that then became part of his justification for sending LGBT people to the death camps, him claiming it was a tradition practiced by their earlier, purer ancestors. But we should also stop and make a different point here. None of this explains Nazi Germany as a whole. The Third Reich didn't get to the extremes it did simply because its leaders were into alternative religions. In fact, while many leading Nazis were into this stuff, paganism had limited appeal among the rank and file. For example, the attempt to reshape Germany by eclipsing Christianity with a paganistic National Socialism met with resistance. While a few hundred ritual weddings took place, and a few dozen babies were christened by touching them with a dagger as an officer read a poem dedicating them to the state, this was generally SS stuff. In fact, even they had to keep it quiet, since even Hitler had told Himmler to knock off the cult behavior. After all, the majority of Germans, including SS men, were Protestant and Catholic.
Even when Hitler was telling them to stop, they kept going.
Stuff might have had some appeal with the public, but very few of them were willing to jettison Christianity wholesale. Hitler, again, despite his atheism, still often invoked God and Jesus in his speeches. And while they made some inroads into incorporating Nazi imagery into Christmas, their attempts to replace St. Nicholas with Wotan, move the holiday to the solstice, and remove references to Jesus from Christmas carols was met with an unusual amount of pushback. Also, it should be noted that it wasn't like Germany was alone in entertaining strange beliefs, including racial ones. Theories about ancient tribes of white people starting all-world culture were all the rage in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It was big in theosophy, and even had echoes in Mormonism. I mean, let's not also forget that the American troops who landed at Normandy were not only a segregated military, but carried segregated supplies of blood plasma. Because, at the time, we harbored some of those same semi-magical beliefs about the purity of blood, and many of those Americans...
Yeah, honestly, even I would have been like, okay, dude, you're about to die. You really want this? Like, sometimes you just gotta wonder. Like, superstition was still rife, okay? It took a while. Like, even with the military, like, advancements back then, religion still can find a way in, you know? You ain't careful, well, you're falling into the old-time beliefs. Well, it'll show you, Hitler and his Nazis weren't the only ones. Yeesh. Anyway.
American soldiers would have balked at getting plasma from a black person. Any historical work on the Pacific War also runs into the uncomfortable territory of Americans speaking about the Japanese as subhuman. Hell, we even had our own mad scientists. In 1942, Japanese-American soldiers from the 100th Battalion were ordered to an island off Mississippi, where they were hunted with dogs in a failed attempt to train them to smell Japanese soldiers. And far stranger things would happen during the Cold War. Now, this is obviously not to suggest an equivalency with the Nazis, not at all. Just that this sort of harmful magical thinking involving race, heritage, and history was widespread, though only in Germany did it become so thoroughly baked into government policy. And there are lots of reasons why that happened. In fact, there are whole libraries of books trying to explain why. So then why look at it specifically through the lens of occultism? Well, think about it this way. Have you ever been to the optometrist? When they test your eyes, they show you a picture, then change the lens and ask which is clearer. Then they do it again with a new lens, and again with one lens being clearer. Then they put all those lenses together, and the picture comes into focus. In history, that's how you use theory. Well, occultism is just one lens, one aspect to layer onto the others, like economic history, the trauma of the First World War, feminist theory, the role of class, or Germany's very long history of anti-Semitic violence. Then when you use several of these lenses together, that picture becomes clearer. So this series is just a piece of that. But when it happens, in that clarity, you get a better idea of how dangerous some of these laughable, silly, and yes, deeply weird ideas are. That racist conspiracy theories, imagined enemies, and subordination of science to the party line is a truly dark path for any country to walk. Once again, thank you.
Yeah, really goes to show you, if your, so-called leader is using religion as a means to troll you, or at least for the reasons for this, you might want to just run. Because frankly, you never know where that thing's going to go, and they might come after you sooner or later. Like, you know how those whole, remember the Westboro Baptist, I think? It's been a while, so I don't know if they're still active or not, but, the guys that would picket, the funerals of soldiers and stuff like that. I think that was them, right? Westboro Baptist? I don't know. It's been a while, so I don't remember what they were, but... Hang on, I gotta remember. I gotta look this up, because frankly, it's on my mind. I'm just curious to see if that's, what's going on here? Topeka, Kansas. Yep, the Westboro Baptists. Yeah, those are the ones that pretty much have all 8. It really goes to show you, it's still alive, and, well, if you ain't careful, you'll fall for that pit. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.